Made for autistic people, parents and carers of kids on the autism spectrum. This is A Different Brilliant with Orion Kelly.
No two autistic people are the same. Open conversations that inform and engage towards a better place for autistic
An Aspect podcast focusing on the strengths, interests and aspirations of the autistic community. Welcome to A Different Brilliant.
Thank you for listening to A Different Brilliant. I'm your host, Orion Kelly, and I'm autistic. A Different Brilliant is an Aspect podcast made for autistic adults and parents or carers of kids on the autism spectrum. My purpose is to inspire, inform, and entertain you through focusing on the strengths, interests, and aspirations of the autistic community. And if you're not autistic, but you're open to learning more about this mysterious disability we call autism, well, you've come to the right place.
A Different Brilliant with Orion Kelly.
On part 2 of our episode on women and girls on the spectrum, we explore what it's like to be an autistic woman. My guest on this episode is actor, writer, author and autistic woman Madeleine Ryan. Madeleine, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you. Well, for the benefit of everyone listening, can you tell us a bit about you and also your writing career?
So I did grow up in a household with journalists, sort of surrounded by books. It was always a part of my life, the kind of the writer and writers. And I thought when I was growing up that I wanted to be an actress, though. I didn't know I was autistic when I was a child. I was diagnosed a lot later in life. I was 28 when I was diagnosed. So for most of my life, I was pursuing acting and I guess surviving as best I could with the knowledge that I had about myself, which kind of wasn't much, I guess. And then once I got into my 20s and I went to acting school, I met some women who were on the spectrum and became very close friends with them. And I think one day, I'd spend whole days with them on the weekends just talking and eating in this beautiful sort of space together. And I just remember thinking, wow, I don't communicate like this with anyone. There's no one in my life that I feel so at ease talking with. This is amazing. And I said it to them and they both kind of looked at me and said, well, perhaps Madeleine, it's because you're on the spectrum. And I was like, what? Really? Oh my goodness. And I didn't really know what to do with the information initially. And then it kind of, alongside that, I started writing a bit more myself. It's kind of like the two things sort of came to fruition at once. And I began writing a novel and I was writing different articles for papers and realizing that gave me a lot of joy and felt really relieving. And the way in which I could write was super supportive of, I guess, that feeling of joy and passion, but also, I could do it in a room by myself and I could express myself. And there was like an ease with that was really reassuring and invigorating. And so that was happening alongside, then these communication sort of issues in my family arose. And I sort of said to them, look, I think I'm autistic. And they were like, what? Really? That makes so much sense. That would there are so many dots we can join now about you, if that's true. And so then we decided to go through the assessment process and I was diagnosed, and then I started writing specifically about the autistic experience. And I think it was at a moment where people were really starting to need that, especially from women, because obviously there isn't a lot of information out there about autistic women, what it means to be an autistic woman, what autistic women are like. So it kind of all collided at once, like stars colliding.
I can't even believe how similar our stories are. It's kind of scary. Oh wow! It's astounding. Well, for starters, as you know, I've worked in radio. I also studied acting down here in Melbourne at a place called.
Did you?
At a place called 16th Street Actors Studio.
That's where I went.
I was the first ever part-time class.
Wow, because I was 2012. Full-time course though. I did the full-time course.
Yeah,
and I met my partner there as well.
Welcome to acting, huh? But yeah, so with Anyway, I can't believe that we both studied at the same, acting at the same place. We both wanted to be in acting, one reason or another. And anyway, there you go. Well, look, maybe we'll write a script and we'll shoot something. Anyway,
About exactly this. Like, what is this? I think that I was drawn to it because I think it helped me better understand myself and other people. Yeah, that was the crux of it for me, for sure.
We need to go back on topic and we can work on the movie project later. So let's talk about your diagnosis. Now, You've talked about what led you to there. Talk us a bit about, being diagnosed, and also let's flag the idea of the barriers for women being diagnosed. Was that something you even had any idea about, or for you was it just like a normal person going to see someone and getting a diagnosis?
No, not at all. It was certainly not that. I mean, I'd been in therapy as well for about a decade already. So I was very much a part of that. I'm going to my therapist once a week for an hour talking about what's going on and basically being diagnosed as experiencing all different things. Because in my teens, I was really struggling with, I guess you call it depression and anxiety, but I kind of developed disordered eating patterns and went through all this stuff that I felt like I needed help quite early on in my teens, I guess. And so I started seeing therapists, but no one ever mentioned autism. I was seeing really great therapists. Like, these people were really wonderful, and I would see them for years at a time before I kind of went to someone else to sort of deal with a different aspect of myself. And no one mentioned it. So it was really those two women on the spectrum that I met at acting school who flagged it. And then I went to my therapist and said, I think I could be autistic. And he kind of looked at me and was like, right, well, I guess that's important to explore. And I was like, yes. And he was like, I have never seen an autistic woman, so this would be kind of new for me as well, but definitely explore it. Like, he was very supportive, but it's not like he knew anything. And he was amazing. He was a wonderful person to see and to speak to, but he didn't know anything about it. So I guess that was my first introduction to how little people know about autistic women. But not only that, I mean, when I think back on my acting experiences, just to bring that back into it, I was constantly being told to stop performing. But it was this strange experience of, it was my first encounter with being, I think, and I've since learned that autistic women are really inclined to like disguise, mask. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you seem like someone who's been able to do that successfully as well. And I do know other men who've done this too, who are probably receiving diagnosis, an autism diagnosis later in life as well. So you must be skilled at this too. And I don't want to make it necessarily a fully gendered thing, but I'm conscious that women, from what I've read, from what I understand, are especially good at performing and masking and being able to mimic a lot of the social cues.
Well, that's a fact. That's
a fact. That's a fact.
I can tell you.
Yes,
I can tell you that's a fact. And you're right. You're right. Given that I got a diagnosis later in life, I was clearly good at masking. But can I say though, I wasn't good at masking to the point where I could maintain relationships, friendships, or job. I mean, it still made trouble for me in workplaces and with relationships and friends. So it's still the right people.
But I would say on that, even though I was able to sustain a lot of friendships, they were friends with a mask.
Yeah.
So even though there was the longevity there, once I started, and this probably happened even before the autism diagnosis really, once I started actually listening to what felt right for me socially, and I started expressing that a bit more, or being drawn to different sorts of people more, or exploring different things, the people that I'd had friendships with didn't know how to relate to that and couldn't anymore. So it's like an inevitable thing. It's just a matter of time. And it's whether or not the people are happy with what's behind the mask and kind of already knew it anyway. Like, I had one friend who kind of said to me, this is a relief because you've never talked about yourself in all the times we've spent together. So the fact that you're starting to do that now is a relief for me, actually, because sometimes meeting up was really hard work because you'd be constantly asking me questions, but you wouldn't actually be sharing anything. And I was like, really? Because, people are very obviously very happy to talk about themselves if you're asking them. So I must have, and I'm sure you could probably relate to that. That was my way in a lot of the time. And so it was nice when I had a friend who was able to see that and be honest about it once I sort of started expressing myself more. But a lot of people, with or without the autism diagnosis, really, once I started being, it's a cliche, but more myself, weren't at ease with that. So the mask is some might argue a blessing, but it's a curse.
Absolutely. I host 4 interview-based podcasts, so you can see that we like asking questions.
Totally.
But then again, which is really frustrating for you and women, but for me actually helped. A comorbidity identified with my autism was anxiety, or ironically for women, they go, oh, you're just anxious. So for me, social anxiety disorder and generalized anxiety disorder is what I was diagnosed with as, which is interesting because people go, how can you do radio? How can you perform? How can you act if you have these anxieties? And I say, no, I don't have those anxieties when I'm performing and acting. I have those anxieties in real life with real people. And the main issue about masking, as you say, is there's really nothing good about masking, because in the end, what masking is the real world is saying you need to be like us to live in our world. So in effect, we're living our entire life in someone else's world. And the only way to do that is by not being ourselves. So, getting a diagnosis, the friends and family and the people, they actually meet you for the first time. That's kind of one of the really daunting things about a diagnosis. But from your point of view, how do you identify yourself regarding a diagnosis? Because a lot of people use different terms, and it'd be interesting to see what you use. And also, I guess, how do you feel about being an autistic woman?
I love being an autistic woman. My encounter with myself since understanding that I'm autistic, and I say I'm autistic because I believe that it's how I perceive the world. It shapes everything about my identity and my idea of my identity. And so I'm happy to say that I'm autistic because it's how my brain's wired. It's how I process information, sensory experiences, just everything comes through that lens because that's, my brain. So I fully encompass autism and saying I'm autistic. But on my, in the diagnosis, it did say, Autism Spectrum, Asperger's at that point, which I know it has sort of changed, or the DSM-5 has now said, everything's just autism and all that sort of stuff. But my decision to say I'm autistic is a little bit separate from that, although I do like the word autism, just the idea that my identity is sort of thanks to a doctor's name sort of didn't feel quite right for me.
Yep.
Just on that, I don't know if that's a linguistics thing or a gender thing. I don't know what it is, but I just, the word autism for me had the same connotations as things like mysticism, veganism, Buddhism, and it was like, oh, autism, like that fits. I can do an ism. I like the isms.
That's
I actually worked at a cafe, and this guy nicknamed me Ism when I was like 17, and so here I am, totally embracing the ism again.
I can see that. I mean, you don't want to say, you have a guy's name. That's strange. I think that's why some people.
It is when you think about it.
That's why some people, and I do it sometimes, refer to it as Aspie. But I totally agree with what you're saying. I'm the same. I say I'm autistic. I don't have autism. Yeah. I don't live with autism. I don't suffer from autism. I am autistic. It's not separate. So, no, I totally agree. Are there benefits? Do you see benefits? I mean, that might sound like a strange question to some people, but what are your kind of biggest benefits you see as being an autistic woman?
Seeing things that other people miss. I think there's a lot of things that a lot of neurotypical people do unconsciously and instinctually, which is a gift. They can kind of, they can summarize a lot of information and take action without having to think too much about it. But the way that I'm wired, or that we're wired, I can see all the little steps that they miss in the process of making a decision about something. And it's, oh, hang on, do you realize that by choosing that, you're also implying this and maybe a bit of that? And like, oh, by the way, has anyone noticed that the fluorescent lights in here are like really horrible and that everyone's like more drained because of that? Or is that just because every supermarket has this lighting and you've all decided that that's the uniform thing and that that's like standard, but no one's actually questioned it? Because this is like, I don't think anyone likes fluorescent lights, but I'm just the one saying it.
Yes.
So there's this like quality of picking up on things others miss, I think is probably summarizes a lot of what I see as the gift for me. And being sensitive, coming at problems from a different perspective, being kind of, I wouldn't say non-judgmental, but I kind of would. But it's like, I guess there's kind of a wide-eyedness to things occurring where it takes a while for me to develop a judgment, I guess, about something. I'm not quick to judge things. I need to weigh up different things. It's just a whole different approach to people, interactions, life, existence that I think is really healthy for the world to embrace, because so many people are kind of going through the motions in a way that autistic people are designed not to. We're designed to question things and to do things differently, and that can help everybody. So I think that it's a huge gift, and I think there's a massive misconception about it and the way that it's handled and related to. And I mean, the work that you're doing, and I'd hope the work that I was doing was really helping to open that up for people, because we're here to help. We're not here to be a burden at all. I think that that'll change with time, that perception.
And I think you're absolutely right that those benefits, those gifts you get, they are really unique compared to what you might get offered from a neurotypical person. And then when you put them together, it really is a great team effort. I can't speak on behalf of you. Yeah. I can't speak on behalf of you and your partner, but my wife is neurotypical, and frankly, I wouldn't have it any other way. I think when you combine her and me together, she helps me, I help her, and we've both created really amazing experiences in our lives. And without each other, we wouldn't have got there. And I think that's just an amazing gift to be able to combine two completely different minds into working relationships, all different facets. And I think if we can actually see that and embrace that more, whether it's in workplaces, relationships, or whatever, I think people will start to realize these gifts, when they go together, they work really well. And that's why I think sometimes I get a bit uncomfortable when there's like shows where they're trying to like hook autistic people up with other autistic people. It's like, guys, are we trying to say are we trying to say, what are you saying? Like, autistic people should date whoever they want to date. Like, do you know what I mean? I get a bit uncomfortable with that kind of mentality. It's like, I'm not too sure what this is about. Are you saying they can only date autistic people? They should. I mean, I'm ranting again, and that's what I'm famous for. But anyway, I think you and I both agree these kind of gifts or benefits. How have they influenced your passion and your career in writing?
Well, yeah, just as you were speaking, I was thinking of all the articles that I've written, and I've worked with editors, and even like I've written a book which is coming out this year, and thinking of the publishers that I've been working with, and just what you described with your wife, that sense of the magic that can happen when the autistic perspective comes together with, I guess you could say, a neurotypical perspective, but also a more mainstream perspective, and what you're able to then express or create when you actually marry all of the different needs. Like, I think that that's true communication, to bring all of that together and then create something special that can speak to everybody, regardless of whether you're on or off the spectrum. That's so powerful. And then that's got a universal quality to it that I think means that everybody can learn from that coming together of different types of brains, different types of perceptions, different types of experiences of the world. If you can marry them and everyone is nourished by that, like, what more could you want?
Absolutely.
So with my writing, I think every article I can think of that I've written, or with the book, I think that the power in it is that that's occurring, and that it can kind of transcend labels, ideally, because it's like, if you've got more brain power or more wiring or more things to draw on, how could that be a negative thing? That could only be a positive thing.
Absolutely. For those listening, what's the name of the book, and what's the best way of finding out more about it?
Well, it's called A Room Called Earth. It is a fiction, and it will be coming out around the world in like fall, spring of this year. It's being published by Scribe in the UK and Commonwealth, and Penguin Press in the US and Canada. Yeah, it's a literary fiction. It's from the first person perspective. She's autistic, and it's a night in her life. She goes to a party. It's set in Melbourne, and she goes to a party and encounters different people, and it's from her perspective. There's a love story. It was very joyous to write, and it was very joyous to develop it and share it. And now, I'll be going through the sort of publishing process. But yes, that's how people can find it later this year. It will be available, hopefully, in a bookshop near them or something. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. I hope you sell a billion copies. And by the way, can I say a legitimate congratulations on such an achievement, an unbelievable achievement. Publishing in those regions is extraordinary. So well done. That's amazing.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, it is. It is. Now, I mean, a lot of people write stuff, but come on, please. She's getting stuff published across the world. Like, hello, give me a break, guys. Seriously, like, please.
Oh, that's so funny.
Okay, now, what would you say are your kind of greatest challenges being an autistic woman?
Belonging. Yeah, it's got to be belonging.
Yep, I can
that
feel
feeling
that.
of belonging. It's like, I guess it starts again. God, I feel like I refer to so many cliches, but I guess that's because there's truth to them. But there's something about, part of me believes that autistic people, in a way, are the manifestations of like a heightened version of what neurotypical people are probably going through, but we're like existing at the extremes. We sense everything in such a direct way that our day-to-day existence is shaped by that, whereas neurotypical people are kind of gliding across the surface. So when I say belonging, I'm conscious that a lot of neurotypical people would obviously grapple with that too. But I can absolutely say that when you put all of my different facets together as an autistic woman and all the different things that means socially and to do with all kinds of things with communication with people and expectations, it has certainly left me feeling, I guess, that feeling of, I don't know if it's a feeling or a perception, but of not fitting in and being misunderstood more frequently than not, and having to wrestle with that. I think that's, and the sense of isolation and alienation that can create is really palpable. And I think ultimately, when I think of all the years I had in therapy prior to the diagnosis, I was essentially grappling with that.
Yeah.
Because I could sense that I was putting on a show in order to fit in. And when I was coming away from social encounters, I wasn't feeling invigorated or nourished by them. I was feeling more lonely. Essentially, it's always been that feeling. It's just now I understand it myself a bit better, and I understand myself a bit better even if others can't. And that has great weight and significance in my life for me. But I'm conscious that, that's something I've always wrestled with. And probably the hardest part about being an autistic woman, I would say.
And I can tell you, I mean, as an autistic man, I completely relate to that. That's absolutely my life. That is exactly everything you said. And I think it's similar to, for many autistics, absolutely 100%. The idea that I feel most alone when I'm around lots of people. The opposite of normal people. Hopefully that helps people listening to understand that they're not alone. But from your point of view, what advice would you give, newly diagnosed women and girls? Maybe it's something that you've learned. Maybe it's something that you didn't get, you wish you got. What kind of advice could you offer them?
Follow what gives you a sense of joy and relief, kind of regardless of how it's perceived or what a doctor does or doesn't tell you or whatever. Follow what gives you a feeling of, joy and relief. It's got to be, because when I've done that in my life, it has opened up doors in terms of connecting with other people. Like I very much, and I'm sure you can relate to this as well, but I very much connect with other people through what my passions are.
Of course.
And what gives me joy and relief has a ripple effect or a domino effect through community, I guess. It can, like it has the power to do that. So if you follow the things that give you joy and relief, not only will it nourish your day-to-day life and help you then understand better how you're wired, once you gravitate toward that, it can connect you with the world too. So it has that, like that's sort of a beautiful byproduct of that process. My parents, even though they didn't know I was autistic, were always very supportive of the things that excited me and that I wanted to express and explore. And that I see as such a saving grace. And now it's just blossomed even more than ever because of understanding autism too, and that part of that being who I am and what I am. So it's all kind of come together. But what gives you joy is a very, very powerful force. So to trust that, because it'll take care of you.
And it's great advice not only for autistic women and girls, but also parents. As you say, if you can, don't focus on the deficits. If you can just find the passions, the strengths, the interests, find those, go there. Let them live in that place. There's no use focusing on, what do you mean you can't ride a bike? All right, we're going to keep practicing. You can ride a bloody bike for the next 7 years. Forget about...
Oh, riding a bike, it took me so long.
Forget about your kid riding a bike. For God's sakes, forget about the bike. What do they actually want to do? Focus on that. And that's exactly the advice you've given, your joy, your strengths, your interests, your passions. Exactly. Yeah. Well said. Great advice. Devastated we have to finish, but it's been it's been a fascinating and really delightful conversation. I hope we can do it again soon.
Oh, definitely. Thank you so much for having me.
Madeleine, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, me too.
My guest was actor, writer, author and autistic woman, Madeleine Ryan.
A Different Brilliant with Orion Kelly.
No two autistic people are the same.
An Aspect podcast focusing on the strengths, interests and aspirations of the autistic community.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of A Different Brilliant. I really do appreciate it. And I hope this episode has inspired, informed and entertained you. And if it has resonated with you in some way, well, please share it with your family and friends so we can reach more people. And if you'd like to continue the conversation, just like the Aspect page on Facebook, or visit autismspectrum.org.au. You're also welcome to send me a message via my website, orionkelly.com.au. A Different Brilliant is an Aspect podcast focusing on the strengths, interests and aspirations of the autistic community. Executive producers are Lisa Cassidy and Dr. Tom Tutton. I'm Orion Kelly, and I look forward to celebrating the neurodiversity of autistic people and providing a voice for the autistic community on the next episode of A Different Brilliant.
Thanks for listening to A Different Brilliant with Orion Kelly, an Aspect podcast on the strengths, interests and aspirations of the autistic community. Our door is open anytime, so like the Aspect page on Facebook or visit autismspectrum.org.au.
My aim, make the world a better place for autistic people.